welcome back to the Drive Collective YouTube channel. Now, today you join us with two early 2000s icons, the 996 GT3 and the E46 M3 CSL. We're going to go around, have a look at the cars, talk about some stories that we have with them, and really get to know both these amazing vehicles. So I actually think these are incredibly iconic cars, right? So against a normal 911 and a 996 GT3, I do think there is a discernible difference.
I think there's a bigger discernible difference, perhaps, than there is between a standard M3 and a 46 M3 CSL, right? Although I appreciate 150 kilos, and you would hugely notice that. This is a hugely iconic car for a variety of different reasons, but I'd say that, to me, a 996 GT3 feels more detached from the standard 911 than that does from a standard M3. But then equally, is that a fair comparison? Because actually, it's not a move on from an M3, it's a move on from a 330 or something, right?
But you're probably right, because the E46 M3 has the same S54. This has a completely different 3.6 Metzger engine. It's completely different dry sump, titanium rods, lighter engine components. So I think it's completely different.
Maintenance burden on an E46 is so much lighter than any 911. And I think people forget this. Like 911, there's some parts that are stupidly cheap.
Yeah, like the brakes,
And they're surprisingly good on fuel. But everything breaks on these. Everything. Like things you couldn't even think break. People will snap clutch pedals on them.
Porsche were at that transition period, weren't they? So they brought in people from Toyota, they like changed their whole way of manufacturing, and then this was theoretically, and I've driven a 993, and you know, they are categorically more grown up, that you can feel they're more put together. And what's so interesting, exactly, they're much heavier, and they do break. And this is the thing that I want to braze up, because this was about 60, 70, for a really good low mileage, £80,000, right? M3 CSL, about, for a low mileage car, £80,000. Price wise, they're very comparable. 997 GT3 is actually a lot more expensive than this. However, like you said, from a maintenance point of view, this is actually a hell of a lot more expensive to maintain than that is.
Gearbox on these is 15 grand, whereas in that it's about 1,500 quid. And engines are 20 grand in these. Engines for those, I guess the CSL one is a bit different, but you can get a brand new long block from BMW for about 20 grand, whereas this, a second-hand one, will cost you 20 grand if you can find one.
I remember in late 2000s, these going down to about £20,000.
I sold my first one for 23 grand.
Around that price point.
2009, 23 grand. Couldn't give it away.
You got to have loved the M3 to go into the dealership and buy one. Whilst the difference is with this, there was enough of a use case, I feel, that you could have gone, like, more people would have wanted to buy this.
I kind of disagree, because the GT3, I was a kid at the time, but I remember everyone seeing this as quite an esoteric product. Compared to Turbo, GT2, or even a pumped up Carrera, you'd have to be a bit of a nutter to get the GT3 at the time. And people looked at the power statistics and the on-pay performance. I thought, why would I spend all that much to get a GT3? A lot of people didn't really get it, and it was only really people who seriously tracking them, or people who were collecting them, who bought the GT3.
And you know what's interesting? That's reflected in the numbers. So I think there were only the 996.2 generation, about 260 supplied in the UK. I think there are about 1,000 in the States.
They couldn't shift them.
And look at the CSL, only 422 in the UK.
I love the E46 M3 CSL to the point that, I mean, I bought this one, right? Do you think we're ever going to get back to something like this?
Not from BMW, in my opinion. People love these, I think, primarily because of how they look and because of how they sound. These 19-inch wheels, which every man and their dog now has on the E46, they love them so much, and that ducktail. Those 2-3 things alone are enough to form an icon. In my opinion, the M4 CSL hasn't got that single iconic difference that makes it really, really desirable to the average person. And the track factor alone is not enough to sell this car. On top of that, the standard GT2 is such a good car. It almost makes anything above that kind of redundant.
Brakes, they are terrible.
And you compare the AP brakes on my CSL versus this, it's night and day.
People say the downfall of the CSL is the SMG box.
I think that is the biggest myth on earth.
Absolutely.
And every single post that's put on Instagram, YouTube, people are going, oh yeah, it would be great with a manual conversion. People love Manuel's pole. I don't know why. But if you own an SMG and you drive it, it suits the car and the engine absolutely perfect. NLA, no longer available.
Well, so you can't buy replacement seats?
No, but it's
that's not that surprising, to be fair.
No, but also if you had an accident, like that would be.
No, it's because people will nick them.
What?
Yeah.
So one of the things people used to do, BMW wouldn't sell you any CSL parts unless you gave them a VIN number. So there's some poor sod whose car is registered 100 wheels, 35 boot lids, all that sort of
You
stuff.
get it from MT Cutters.
So the other thing is that the seats in the back as well are
completely unique.
Yes,
Completely unique and unusable.
Also, you can fit Isofix to this.
It's actually so comfortable.
I mean, that's the reclining there. You've got a lot of space.
Loads of space.
Yeah, look, Gallon. I mean, you're taller than everyone. So.
No, but still. Went through all the effort putting these lovely bucket seats in. They don't have harness holes.
That's very true.
You can't use one track.
When they were designing it, ultimately they considered that what they were making was a road car. They weren't making a track car, they were making a road car that people could use on track. So therefore, this was for the occasional track user.
And interestingly, they sold them with Cup 2s and they made you sign a disclaimer.
And if you didn't sign it, you'd get the standard Diamond Cut 19s.
This was the first M3 to have a carbon roof.
Yes.
Correct.
Right? And I do think that makes a massive difference. I really do. I think you can feel it hunkering down on the road and you can feel that.
Loads of centre of gravity.
Absolutely. And that weight reduction as well off of it. A couple of upgrades I would do on this, the diff and the brakes. The way it revs and the way it transfers power, it's like night and day with this. This is sluggish. It's a little bit like that. Whilst the 4.1 you've got in yours, power just goes
It's insane.
Yeah.
But, however, you have made the mistake of polybushing.
Polybushing. Do not polybush.
Which you polybush?
Everything.
Okay, talk about Porsches.
Yes.
Because this is a great car, but it's interesting that whenever you put a Porsche and BMW together, people want to talk about the BMW.
But do you think that's because it's a bit more relatable?
100%. I think it is, yeah. I think there's people have grown up allowing themselves to dream about BMWs. When I was a kid, I didn't allow myself to dream about a 911. It just didn't seem like something that was relatable. And also, I feel like drifting has had a massive impact on the desire and appeal factor of a BMW. When people think about BMWs, they think about Chris Harris sitting there oversteering them, and just generally the idea that they could get BMW and learn how to do that. Whereas when you think about Porsche 911, it's all very serious, going to the ring, doing
and it's all about getting around the track as fast as possible.
And you know what we were talking about, how BMW are missing the mark with a lot of their cars? Porsche just seem to be getting it right.
Yeah, Porsche are doing amazing.
The table flips, right? But at the time, that was the it car, and this was kind of nerdy, rich guy.
Well, I mean, like what? Because everyone hated. Which, by the way, we were talking about this. I think, controversially, because there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with me, because of these fried egg headlights. Well, not even fried eggs. You know,
poached eggs.
Poached eggs, exactly.
Yeah.
This is the 996 is going to be one of the most iconic design 911s. And when people go forward and think about a 911, I think potentially, especially with the 996 turbo, when you think Porsche turbo, 911 turbo, you're going to think 996 turbo. It used to be 930 turbos.
There'll be a lot of guys out there who, when they think of a 911 turbo, they go straight to 964 and Bad Boys.
Bad Boys, absolutely. Exactly the same thing.
It depends. Whereas I think my generation, if I think of a 911, the first one I would tend to think of will be the one that was spinning at the beginning of, what's the film?
Gone in 60 Seconds.
Gone in 60 Seconds, yeah.
But that's why your one's so iconic with the yellow lights.
Yeah, because Porsche did make a big push to make sure that their cars were featured in films and in TV.
Well, they needed to, right? They were going to go financially bust. This is one of the cars that saved them.
There's rumours that was a myth and it was all funky accountancy to try and, because Porsche wanted to be bought out.
Oh.
And no, they wanted to buy Audi or VAG.
They wanted to buy
and then
VAG.
they quit the books, and then instead they got bought out. And it was all an accounting mission.
No,
there can be a whole documentary about.
Oh, there could be. There could be. It was to do. They were buying swap options and so forth, and there was nearly a point where they nearly owned them, and their market turned, and they ended up getting owned by VAG.
Porsche could have owned Volkswagen.
That was because they were buying swap options. Yeah.
The myth of the 996 saving Porsche, I do think is a bit overstated.
Fine.
They had to go water cooled because they couldn't get stable enough emissions from the air cooled engine because the temps fluctuate all the time. And they couldn't get the performance they wanted from 2 valve heads. They had to do this just to keep up with other competitors like the Ferrari 355, right?
Fine. It is misunderstood. And I think it still is misunderstood. I don't think people still get them. And I think everyone's like, 997.2 is the one to have.
Yeah.
No.
Is it maybe a bit too raw for people? Is that?
I mean, you've driven them.
I think you're right, that they have refined this to a certain extent from the 0.1. So obviously the exterior stuff, but inside, it feels a little bit more put together. But compared to the 997, it is much rawer. And I think if people were to jump into a 997, natural thing to do is go for the 997 because it feels newer, it's probably easier to drive, less raw, and I think you've got to want to drive a Porsche and have that kind of feeling that you need to be completely on your game while driving it. And it's only for certain types of people like us who are enthusiasts. So I think it's completely misunderstood.
The fact is, if you want a manual road car with talkative steering and you want to get in and not think about all these things and just experience the mechanical feeling of driving a car, I don't actually think you can really beat a 996 as a lifestyle proposition. You can get more feedback from a Lotus, fine, but you could just jump into this and drive it, and it's got a tin top and it doesn't leak. You know, it's a genuinely, it strikes balance between usability.
But the key thing is you feel like you're driving, like you feel like you're feeling everything that you're doing,
exactly.
and that's what the newer cars.
And you feel like as a driver, you're giving an integral part, playing an integral part in the experience of making that car go quicker.
Yeah.
And it's all you.
I mean,
I'm not sure that I would do 3,000 miles around Europe in this.
No, it depends. Basically, standard car seats are designed for all body shapes. Because bucket seats are inherently designed for one body shape, and that's the manufacturer assumption as to who the person's going to be.
So this interior, so the door cards, completely carbon fiber, center console carbon fiber.
Steering wheel.
Steering wheel is different
You
as
only
well.
have one button, the M button.
And
To be fair though, it should be said, this one is a particularly high specification one, I think. Because you could have it more pared back. You didn't have to have leather on the doors. And you didn't have to have leather on the top of the dashboard.
Alessandro,
No, I'm just saying you didn't have to. It could have been more stripped back than this particular example.
And that's when the RS comes in.
This GT3 is quite controversial because it's missing the key GT3 signifier of the interior, which is actually has a center console. Whereas GT3s as standard don't, and it's a huge thing because the 906 was the first Porsche to not have the flat bottom of dash.
oh yeah, because this is the 993, isn't it? The 993 had no.
Well, all the Porsches beforehand had nothing there, so they had a flat underneath.
Oh, of course.
Then most Carreras came with a center console, and a very popular mod for Carrera and is to get the GT3 center console delete, which is to get rid of that and to get some carpet in place.
What kind of saving? What kind of weight saving?
Oh, like probably 500 grams.
500 grams.
But it's more for legroom. But it's interesting, we've gone straight to this car, we've dwelled on it, and I think what I find really interesting about M3 owners, there's a lot of overlap with Ford owners, which we talked about last time, and it's that effect of the fact that you can get this body shell there or thereabouts with a 318xi, right? The dramatic difference between a 318xi and a CSL is so huge, I think that makes it really compelling, because it's everyone's dream thing to take a standard normal car and see how far you can push it. Whereas the GT3, it starts off as a great car, which is a Carrera, and the difference isn't as dramatic. There's still a big difference between GT3 and Carrera, more than people realise, but it's not as much as a talking point. It's basically just another supercar. I mean, like, a really special supercar, but just another supercar.
The point is that, like, I got into BMWs and ended up owning a couple of E46s because I wanted the E46 CSL.
Yeah.
So you own the cars on the way up to it, and you kind of feel like you're part of it. You're not part of it, but you kind of feel like you're part of it because there's that attainable level car. You know, an E46 is £2.5 grand car.
You know, I think this, when I was 13, 14, this is the car that came out, and this is the car that started, I realized what cars were. And you know, when I was 18, I had a massive ego, so I was like, I want a Lamborghini when I'm like 30 or 40. That's the car that I want. And now, having had this, I don't, even though I love like a Murcielago, I'd love to own a Murcielago, I'd love to own a Gallardo, like LP640, LP560 Superleggera. I just don't think anything does it as much as this does it for me.
Yeah.
That's my personal thing.
I completely get that, yeah.
And I think that there's something about that is just you cannot replicate, and like no supercar in the world will do it, and that's why I will never sell it.
It does that because it's the car you wanted when you were 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah, and it was a car that I thought I could get. Now I have it. It's everything that I wanted it to be. It has not disappointed me in any way.
Because it was never about the performance. So
exactly.
So it's time, it's time.
Exactly.
It's about emotional connection, which only deepens as the car gets older, as it gets rarer, and as it gets less and less replaceable. The fact is, you cannot replace this car with a newer or better M car. Yeah. Whereas you can replace that with a 907, a 901, and you'll probably feel like, you know what, this is an upgrade. Aside from the steering wheel, it is just a better car, and there isn't a specific emotional connection with the 906. I've got maybe an emotional connection with 96.1 GT3 just because it's got the Fridays. I like that. But that's specific. But generally speaking, this has this iconic thing that goes way beyond its on-paper statistics that is not replaceable by an E90 GTS, F80 GTS, or the modern CSL.
Well, I mean, you can almost see that BMW have been trying to replicate it, right? Yeah. They've been trying to do that, and they've just missed the mark so much.
And you know what's funny? I sold my first CSL for an E90 M3.
Manual though?
It was a manual.
Okay, fine. But here's an interesting one. Do you think this is an unfair comparison then?
To what?
Between the two cars?
No, because
it's a similar era.
Yeah.
They do the ring in roughly the same amount of time.
Every magazine compared these two against each other. They were competitors.
Yeah.
On paper, they were on-paper competitors in their day.
E46 M3s in general, which obviously feeds into CSL, I think E46 M3 is possibly the most iconic performance car in the UK car scene of all time. And I've seen this on social media, obviously as part of my job and my posts. E46 M3s outperform every other car on social media. And when I had one, it was like an instant in for networking. You go up to a car guy, someone you want to get a job off or whatever, and you tell them you have an E46 M3, and they ask you 2 questions. Is it coupe and convertible? Is it manual SMG? Actually, 3 questions. Is it sunroof or non-sunroof? And if you get all 3 right, you have a coupe, it's a manual, it's a non-sunroof, because by most people's standards, that's what they want, you're instantly in with them. People love these cars. Yeah. They love them. Yeah. They love them way more than E92, F82, G82 combined. Yep. I think the only other car that tops is the E33, but you can't relate to an E33 because most people can relate.
It's a real enthusiast car.
What could be a spiritual successor to this? So 1M, I would say, I would go out and say, I haven't driven one. I've been in one around the ring, ring taxi, M5 CS.
M5 CS gets very well reviewed.
Because what I'm saying is that it's that much different.
Yeah, the changes were so significant.
They really got it right.
Yeah.
I think everything else, they've just missed the mark, unfortunately. I obviously own this, you obviously own that. If we were to do it all again, would you take that or would you take this?
I think, everything considered, I think the CSL is probably the car that I'd pick if I had to choose one or the other.
Why is that?
Because I think it gets under your skin. I feel it's the more usable car. I think it sounds much better. It's the way it makes you feel. But obviously, this is still an amazing car. But I think the CSL wins it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Which is hard to say because I love the 911. For me, even though the M3 CSL was the car that I aspired to, the 911 was the thing that I lusted over, right?
Yeah.
But I think also for a person who may be looking to purchase one of these, this may be a bit more obtainable.
Yeah, I think so. I think the purchase price, as we've said previously, is probably the same, but running costs and maintenance, I think that this trumps it because, Porsche parts are much more expensive, the mechanicals.
Apart from all the NLA parts.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, the bits that you can't replace, obviously that's gonna, money can't buy that.
But I do think that there is something about that because you do have to run these cars, right?
Yeah.
We drive these cars. This is what Drive Collect is about. We drive
Absolutely,
our cars. And when you drive your cars, you have to factor in the maintenance. And I do think that from the maintenance side of things, having owned a 911, they are categorically more expensive than a Porsche, than a BMW, sorry. And also the way that this looks, the way that, when Gallop was saying the way that M3 will introduce you to people, because everyone has a story with an M3.
Yeah.
I do think it is a car that I would choose, and the reason why I bought it.
Yeah.
Over a 996 GT3.
Yeah, I think so, and that can blend into your life. You can use it for everything. This is more of an occasion car.
Yeah.
And I think that probably sums it up, really.
Yeah. So, summing it up, CSL wins over the GT3. No, there's no winner, is there, really?
No, they're both great cars.
Yeah, we're quite lucky, aren't we, Tim?
You're both nuts.
Oh, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more from what we're doing, subscribe. And please do get in the comments and tell us what you thought.
Yeah. What Mike's doing.